Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to embark on a seriously fascinating journey. We'll be tracing the path from the untouched, raw natural world right to the everyday items sitting in front of you. Basically, we're unpacking exactly how the physical Earth transforms into the bustling economy we all live in.
So, here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the gifts of nature, then move on to categorizing our resources. Next, we'll look at the engine of production, followed by connecting the factors, and finally, we'll wrap up with human capital and sustainability.
But before we dive into any textbook definitions, I want you to take a quick look around. Really, ask yourself, how did all these everyday objects actually come to exist? I mean, your phone, your shoes, that chair you're sitting on right now, none of them just popped into existence out of thin air, right? They all started as something entirely different somewhere out there in nature.
Which brings us to part 1, the gifts of nature.
Okay, so the absolute crucial point here is that a tree, or say a river, only really becomes a resource when we actually have the tools, the financial means, and the cultural desire to use it. Think about it. If we literally can't reach a mineral deep underground, or if it costs way too much money to dig it up, or even if our society just deems it sacred and untouchable, well then it remains just an element of nature. It's human utility that flips the switch from nature to resource.
Just think about the sheer, incredible volume and force of the Dudhsagar waterfall over in Goa. This is raw power in nature, right? But if we apply the right technology and investment, that rushing water can become hydroelectric power, which is a totally vital resource for modern living.
Moving right along to part 2, categorizing our resources.
We basically divide nature's gifts into 3 main buckets based on exactly what they do for us. The first bucket, completely non-negotiable. Air, water, and soil are the absolute foundations of keeping us alive. The second bucket gives us the physical building blocks for our world, stuff like timber and metal ores. And the third bucket, that provides the energy, like coal or sunlight, that we need to drive our transportation, our electricity, and our massive industries.
Now, nature is incredibly resilient, and it actually relies on 2 very distinct processes to bounce back. You've got restoration to heal and regeneration to spark new growth. There's a subtle but really important difference here. Think of restoration like a forest healing its burnt soil after a massive wildfire. Regeneration is what happens next. It's the actual sprouting of new trees and the creation of a thriving, brand new ecosystem. It's literally nature's built-in survival mechanism. And that brings us to a pretty stark contrast. Resources that nature can replace, if we're careful, versus the ones that are just gone forever once we use them up. Renewable resources harness those exact processes of restoration and regeneration we just talked about. But here's the catch. They only stay renewable if we don't disturb their natural rhythm by over-harvesting them. Non-renewable resources, on the other hand, are a one-time inheritance. Once we burn a lump of coal that took millions of years to form, it is gone for good.
But there's good news. By practicing things like gentle farming, we can actually work with nature's rhythm and ensure our renewable resources actually stay renewable. When we minimally disturb the earth, we retain the soil's moisture and protect that delicate underground ecosystem. This allows the land to regenerate properly, year after year.
All right, on to part 3, the engine of production.
So to turn those raw resources into your shiny new phone or your running shoes, we need the magic ingredients of the economy. We call these the factors of production. You can basically think of this as the ultimate recipe for everything around you. Land represents all those natural resources we just discussed. Labor is the human, physical, and mental effort. Capital is the machinery, the tools, and the money invested. And entrepreneurship, that's the creative vision that brings the other 3 together to actually create a product.
To put this into perspective, there's a great quote from Bibek Debroy, the former chairman of the Economic Advisory Council. He perfectly highlights why maximizing the efficiency of these exact building blocks is so absolutely vital on a national scale. You see, it's not just about having a ton of natural resources or a massive population. True economic growth really takes off when a society figures out how to combine its land, its human labor, and its financial capital in the most productive and efficient way possible.
Which naturally leads us to part 4, connecting the factors.
It's fascinating to see the stark contrast in how resources are connected in the real world. On one hand, you might have a woodworker relying heavily on human hands and traditional tools. On the other hand, you have industrial operators relying entirely on specialized, highly complex machinery. Both are actively combining those factors of production to make a good. But the proportions, they are vastly different. One is utilizing a high amount of physical labor with minimal capital, while the other is using expensive capital machinery to do the heavy lifting.
So depending on what we're actually making, the recipe completely changes. A beautifully carved wooden chair is what we call labor-intensive, but a tiny microchip, that requires a highly capital-intensive approach. If you're farming by hand or weaving textiles, you're firmly in a labor-intensive sector. But if you're building cars or smartphones, you need massive factories, robotics, and huge financial investments, making it capital-intensive.
And a satellite orbiting the Earth is pretty much the ultimate example of a capital-intensive project. You simply cannot build and launch something like this with just human hands and simple tools. No way! It requires billions of dollars, incredibly specialized materials mined from the Earth, and literally the most advanced machinery humanity has ever created.
Finally, let's dive into Part 5, Human Capital and Sustainability.
Because here's the thing. Without human capital, which means our education, our health, and our collective know-how, none of those other factors of production could ever come to life. You can have all the raw land and all the expensive machinery in the whole world, but if you don't have educated, healthy, and skilled human beings to operate those machines and manage that land, nothing gets produced. We are the ultimate engine.
And human capital definitely isn't a new concept. For example, generations of ancient Indian sculptors didn't just stumble their way through their incredible work. They actually relied on texts like the Shilpa Shastras for exact, rigorous specifications. It really shows how knowledge, which is the absolute core of human capital, accumulates over time. They treated their highly skilled labor as a genuine form of devotion, which is just a profound historical example of human capital at work.
But there's a catch to all of this. If our relentless drive for production ignores nature's limits, we face some severe consequences. We're talking biodiversity loss, overharvesting, and climate change. When our massive, capital-intensive industries demand more from the Earth than it can possibly restore and regenerate, the entire system breaks down. Pollution poisons the water, forests completely disappear, and the very resources we desperately need to survive become dangerously scarce.
So how do we solve this? Well, we can actually look to the ancient principle of locus sangraha, which essentially means acting for the well-being of all. It's a really powerful reminder that true economic success isn't just about extracting as much as possible as fast as possible. It's about wise stewardship. We absolutely must balance our need to produce goods with our responsibility to protect the planet's regenerative cycles for future generations.
So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with one final thought regarding the products you consume every single day. The next time you buy a new piece of clothing or upgrade your phone, think about the raw materials pulled from the earth, the labor involved, and the capital invested. Ask yourself, is this cycle of production truly sustainable? And how does your own consumption impact the greater good? Thanks so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating journey from raw nature to our modern economy. Keep questioning the world around you.